Everyone thinks weight loss is about eating less, but the real game is when you eat. When you compress your meals into a single window, your body changes in ways most people don't understand, and it all starts with insulin. Blood sugar and insulin sensitivity. Every time food enters your system, your pancreas releases insulin to manage the incoming energy. Do that repeatedly throughout the day, 3 meals, a couple of snacks, and insulin stays elevated for most of your waking hours. Over time, your cells gradually stop responding to it as effectively. That's insulin resistance, and it sits at the root of weight gain, fatigue, brain fog, and even elevated blood pressure. Restricting your eating to a single daily meal gives the pancreas an extended recovery window, roughly 23 hours per cycle. Clinical research following pre-diabetic patients on compressed eating schedules has consistently shown meaningful reductions in fasting glucose levels. Insulin sensitivity improves, cells become more receptive, and the body starts managing carbohydrates the way it's supposed to again. Fat metabolism and body composition. Here's where it gets interesting for anyone whose main goal is changing their body composition. Once insulin drops low enough, typically several hours into a fast, your body's ability to access stored fat increases substantially. The body can't efficiently burn fat while insulin is elevated. Lower it for long enough, and fat cells become accessible as fuel. What makes a one-meal-a-day approach different from standard calorie restriction is that it doesn't trigger the metabolic panic response. When you cut calories gradually across multiple small meals, the body senses scarcity and lowers its basal metabolic rate to compensate. Fasting research shows a different pattern entirely. Because the body is actively burning fat rather than running low on available fuel, metabolic rate stays protected. Your system stays efficient. The weight that comes off tends to come from fat stores, while lean tissue is actively preserved, in large part because fasting significantly elevates human growth hormone, which plays a direct role in maintaining and repairing muscle tissue. And visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that carries the most metabolic risk, responds particularly well to extended fasting windows, according to multiple clinical studies tracking body composition changes in fasting subjects. Energy and cognitive performance. One of the first things people notice when they start eating this way is a shift in how their energy feels throughout the day. The classic afternoon crash, the one that sends people reaching for caffeine at 2 o'clock, is directly linked to blood sugar oscillation. Eat, spike, crash. Eat again, spike, crash. Repeat. When blood sugar stabilizes because you're not constantly feeding, that roller coaster stops. Energy becomes more consistent. Adults monitored in studies frequently describe a noticeable increase in sustained energy and alertness, not a wired, stimulant-driven feeling, but something steadier and more reliable. Brain function follows a similar pattern. As fasting extends, the liver converts fatty acids into molecules called ketones, which serve as a highly efficient alternative fuel source for the brain. Unlike glucose, which can cause fluctuations in cognitive performance depending on your last meal, ketones provide an unusually clean and stable supply of energy to neural tissue. Some clinical work with older adults has found measurable improvements in memory and cognitive test performance on fasting protocols, outcomes that surprised many researchers expecting the opposite. Inflammation and joint health. Digestion is not a passive process. Every time your body breaks down food, it produces a low-grade inflammatory response. For most people eating 3 or more times a day, that response never fully winds down. Over years, this chronic low-level inflammation contributes to joint stiffness, aching muscles, and a range of systemic health issues. Extended fasting gives the inflammatory response time to resolve. Clinical markers including C-reactive protein, one of the most closely watched indicators of systemic inflammation, show consistent declines in subjects who shift to compressed eating schedules. People with chronic joint discomfort often report noticeable improvements within the first few weeks as the body gets time to address tissue irritation that had previously been masked by constant digestive demand. Cellular renewal and skin health. There's a cellular cleanup mechanism called autophagy that most people have never heard of, but it may be one of the most powerful biological processes activated during fasting. When cells are deprived of incoming nutrients, they begin breaking down and recycling damaged internal components, old proteins, dysfunctional organelles, cellular debris that would otherwise accumulate and cause problems. This recycling process has broad implications. From a longevity standpoint, it prevents damaged cells from persisting and contributing to disease. From a skin perspective, it supports the renewal of connective tissues and accelerates the turnover of damaged cells. Dermatological researchers studying fasting have noted improvements in skin clarity and texture in subjects following extended fasting schedules, and the mechanism, faster cellular renewal driven by autophagy, offers a credible biological explanation for why. Longevity researchers studying caloric restriction and fasting protocols in various model organisms have also found that these interventions consistently extend both lifespan and what scientists call health span, the period of life during which biological systems remain fully functional. Liver, digestion, and gut health. Your liver is responsible for processing everything that passes through your digestive system, and in many people following a typical Western diet, it's working with excess fat deposits that impair its function. This condition, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is far more common than most people realize, and insulin plays a major role in it. Elevated insulin signals the liver to produce and store fat. Lower insulin for extended periods and the liver begins drawing down those stored reserves. Medical imaging studies tracking liver fat in patients who adopt compressed eating windows show consistent and often rapid reductions, outcomes that typically require months of pharmaceutical intervention through conventional approaches. Further down the digestive tract, fasting activates a process called the migrating motor complex, essentially a cleansing wave that moves through the gastrointestinal system during periods without food. This process is suppressed every time you eat. Gastroenterological research shows that giving the gut adequate rest time significantly reduces bloating, gas, and the general discomfort associated with impaired gut motility. The mucosal lining also gets a chance to heal, which translates into more efficient nutrient absorption when you do eat. Cardiovascular and immune benefits. Blood pressure regulation and insulin are more closely linked than most people realize. Elevated insulin signals the kidneys to retain sodium and water, which directly increases blood volume and pressure. As fasting drops insulin to baseline, the kidneys release that retained sodium, blood vessels relax, and pressure decreases. Clinical trials focused specifically on intermittent fasting have reported statistically significant drops in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure without any pharmaceutical intervention. The immune system also undergoes a notable shift during extended fasting. White blood cells, particularly the older, less effective immune cells, are broken down during periods without food. When eating resumes, the body responds by generating a fresh population of more active and responsive immune cells. Research from major university laboratories has described this process as a partial immune system reboot, clearing out compromised cells and replacing them with a more capable defensive force. The practical result is a stronger, more responsive immune response during periods of exposure to illness. Appetite regulation and food relationship. One thing that catches most people off guard when they start eating one meal a day is how quickly cravings for processed food tend to diminish. Hunger, in large part, is driven by a hormone called ghrelin and by blood sugar volatility. When blood sugar stabilizes and insulin stays low, the aggressive hunger signals that typically drive junk food cravings simply lose their intensity. Dietary research involving participants on compressed eating protocols has found a consistent pattern. Over time, people naturally gravitate toward more nutrient-dense foods without being told to. Their appetite regulatory systems recalibrate. The pull toward high-sugar, high-refined carbohydrate foods weakens because the biological mechanisms that make those foods irresistible in the first place, blood sugar spikes and crashes, ghrelin surges, are no longer operating in the same way. The practical advantages. Beyond everything happening at the cellular and hormonal level, there's a practical dimension to this that's worth acknowledging. Preparing, eating, and cleaning up after 3 meals a day takes a significant amount of time and mental energy. Planning what to eat, tracking portions, managing hunger between meals, compressing all of that into a single daily meal returns hours to your day. The financial impact is equally real. Feeding yourself once per day rather than 3 or more times per day dramatically reduces your weekly spending on groceries and removes the daily temptation of restaurant meals and delivery apps. People who adopt this approach frequently describe it as one of the most unexpectedly freeing lifestyle changes they've made, not because eating less feels restrictive, but because the constant cognitive and logistical overhead of managing meals throughout the day simply disappears. If you found any of this useful, a like on this video helps more people find it. And if you want to keep going deeper on this topic, subscribing makes sure you don't miss what's coming next. We're going to keep exploring the science behind how the body works, what actually moves the needle, and how to apply it practically. See you in the next one.